Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. I want to just make a few comments on our findings. I would like to begin by reminding your committee that in terms of the mandate of 1920, a sacred trust was undertaken in respect of Palestine. This sacred trust still continues today. In 2004, the International Court of Justice recalled the sacred trust and confirmed that it still exists today, and that in its present form it means that the self-determination and independence of the Palestinian people should be promoted. So one must never forget the sacred trust that was undertaken by the mandatory power, United Kingdom in the first instance, but also by the United Nations as the successor of the League of Nations. Today I simply wish to underline two issues. First of all, the failure of the United Nations to implement the findings of the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of 2004. You will recall, Mr. Chairman, that the International Court emphasized not only the illegality of the construction of the wall in Palestinian territory, but it also confirmed that the building of settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory is contrary to international law. It also emphasized that the Geneva Convention dealing with occupied territory is applicable to the occupied territory, and that the major human rights conventions are also applicable. These are important findings, some of which were arrived at unanimously. For instance, the finding on the illegality of settlements and the applicability of Geneva Conventions and the Human Rights Conventions was arrived at unanimously by the court. And we find it very strange that the United Nations has not paid more attention to this advisory opinion. In particular, we are concerned about the failure of the Secretary General as the United Nations member of the quartet to acknowledge the existence of the advisory opinion, let alone the fact that it is binding upon the United Nations. And this brings me to the second question, and that is the quartet. We believe that the quartet, which has assumed responsibility for peacemaking in the Middle East, should be more closely monitored by the General Assembly. It's extraordinary that this body, the quartet, has been given these great powers by the Security Council, yet it is common knowledge that the decision-making in the quartet is largely taken by the United States. It's very strange that the quartet has never expressly endorsed the decision of the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice. It's also extraordinary that its special envoy, Mr. Tony Blair, was allowed to oppose, lobby against Palestinian statehood when the Palestinian Authority applied for admission to the United Nations last year. It's also extraordinary that one member of the quartet, the United States, should have vetoed a resolution in the Security Council dealing with the illegality of settlements. So the conduct of the members of the quartet is contrary to the task that it has been conferred upon it. And it's also important to stress that the quartet makes regular innocuous statements on the Middle East. Most of these statements show a clear bias in favor of Israel. For instance, the Quartet has never concerned itself with the violations of international humanitarian law that occurred in Operation Cast Lead. It has never referred to the fact-finding mission of the Human Rights Council, commonly known as the Goldstone Commission report. These are disturbing features, but our concern is that the General Assembly has not raised its voice in respect of the Quartet. And we believe that the time has come for the General Assembly, perhaps at the initiative of your committee, to concern itself more with the activities and the inactivities of the Quartet and to ensure that it carries out its task properly. But above all, we ask that there should be a much closer monitoring of the Quartet and particularly the role of the Secretary General in the Quartet. Thank you.